It's time now for an in-depth look at the market action, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Dr. Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, we saw this afternoon the Supreme Court ordering lower courts to go back and review their decisions, one of them affecting Samsung heir Lee Jae-yong. The lower court had dismissed some charges against him, but now the court found he actually did bribe the presidential office. So now he's in jeopardy again, it seems. How did the market respond to that decision just about an hour ago?
Okay, well, the market did not respond well. For Samsung stock in particular, it went down as much as 2.15%, but it recovered somewhat toward the very end of trading, so it ended today about 1.7% lower than where it used to be. And then for the stock market in general, KOSPI fell by 0.53% and KOSDAQ fell by 1.23%, so it was not a good day. It also shows that I think generally the stock investors believe that Lee Jae-yong would not be found guilty, but because the expectation was overturned, that's partially why we saw some fluctuations in the stock market.
Yeah, but staying with that, I mean, you could see this as being some resilience on the part of Samsung. It could have gone down by much more conceivably, and it was less than 2%.
Yes, well, I think that's. I think because Samsung had a lot of mixture of good and bad news lately, that some of the effects were mitigated. A lot of people were expecting Lee to be found guilty, so some of that expectation was fixed into the market price at the beginning. And then there were actually some good news for the Samsung stock in the last few days when the Morgan Stanley Emerging Market Fund rebalanced their funds. They thought it might have a large negative effect on Korean stock market in general and Samsung Electronics in particular, but it didn't have as much negative effect as some investors feared. And then there's the Japanese strategic products, the chemicals that Samsung needed for semiconductor production. The fallout from that, at least so far, has not been as great as a lot of people fear. So I think those factors also played a part in Samsung stock not falling as much as some people expected.
Got it. Well, let's shift gears here and talk about the Moon administration's budget for next year, more than 500 trillion won. That'll push the national debt to over 800 trillion won next year. Why have they decided on such a big budget, and do you think it'll help in the ways that they're hoping?
Well, the basic problem is that Korean growth is really lackluster this year, and it's expected to be even worse next year. So far this year, the first quarter's growth was minus 0.4%, and then the second quarter was 1.1%, which was fairly good, but still that means that the first half of the year Korean growth was only about 0.2%. Now, if we want to meet Bank of Korea expectations for this year's growth, 2.2%, we're going to have to do slightly better in the second half of the year this year than we did last year, and virtually no one believes that that's possible. So there's actually a very good possibility that growth will fall below even 2%, and next year's picture is looking worse than this year's picture. So that means that just about the only tool that we have to keep the economy from falling even further is to have a super budget next year. Now, as an economist, I can agree with their logic, but I think they really need to look at not just the amount of the budget, but where the money is being spent. I'm somewhat happy with the fact that R&D expenditures are increased, but we also need structural reforms to make sure that those R&D products are commercialized, and also the government has increased a lot of budget concerning job programs, but a lot of that is concentrated on 20-year-olds and over 60-year-olds. But we had a really bad record for job growth in 40, 50-year-old people during this year. And if you consider those 40 and 50-year-old people, those are head of households who have to lead families. So perhaps the money could be better spent not on projects for 60-year-olds or over, but on the prime age workers.
Right. I mean, they will be with us for quite a long time. People are living longer and longer. In terms of the budget spending, we've seen the Korean government try to front load it in the past to sort of, as they did with this year's budget. Do you think that'll happen too?
I think it'll happen because, well, we are not as sure as what's going to happen in the second half of the next year, but we're fairly sure what's going to happen in the first half of next year, and it's not looking pretty.
All right. Well, tomorrow we're going to see the Bank of Korea holding a policy meeting in which it'll decide on where interest rates are going. Things have changed since they met a month ago, and it seems like there's a bigger chance now of another interest rate cut this year. What do you think they'll do?
Okay, well, right now the market expectation seems to be that the Bank of Korea will hold the interest rate in August and lower it in October. And that's mainly because the Korean won has weakened almost too quickly during the last couple of months, partially because of the problems with Japan, partially because the growth prospects for Korean economy is falling. I actually expected, and I was hoping that the Bank of Korea would lower the interest rate in August because, well, we just had the supplementary budget, and I think it'll have a lot more synergic effect if we lowered the interest rate right before the supplementary budget and right after the supplementary budget. But I can well understand why the Bank of Korea may want to hold the lowering the interest rate off for another month because, well, if the won loses its value too quickly, then it could lead to a lot of problems in the international capital flows into Korea or out from Korea. And we also don't want to create too many problems with the Trump administration. If they see the won weakening too much, they may start complaining about the trade effects.
Very interesting, Dr. Yong. I wish we had more time to talk about that issue in particular. We appreciate your insights, as always.
Thank you.